Hello everyone! Thank you for taking the time to watch this video and join me as we talk about pornography and how it impacts our lives and especially our children. If we haven't met before, my name is Ben Murrie. I live here in Cary and attend Crosspointe with my wife and 2 teenage sons. And for a living, I design and deliver sexual and interpersonal violence prevention trainings, which basically just means I talk to people about how to stop doing all the crappy things we do to each other humans. So, super easy, super straightforward. Porn is a very scary topic for a lot of us, and for good reason. So maybe it's because we grew up in a purity culture where we didn't talk about sex. Maybe it's because we're drawn to it ourselves, so we feel guilty and hypocritical condemning it. Or maybe due to the lightning fast growth of technology the past few decades, porn has changed tremendously. And it's one of the most obvious areas where we can't just parent the way we were parented. So we have to be grown-ups on this one. And I can totally understand why we may just want to sit this one out or throw our hands up in the air and blame it on culture. But the reality is that few things in our kids' lives more obviously and completely remove the image of God from other human beings. And because of that, it's our job to do something about it. But don't worry, while a lot of the context and delivery and consumption of pornography is new, I want to try and demystify it a bit, because many of the principles behind what it is and how we can talk about it are not new. So, first off, let's get a working definition going so that we can all make sure we are talking about the same thing. Okay, for the purpose of this video, we are going to define pornography as sexually explicit media targeted towards heterosexual men with the intention of making a profit. That's what we call mainstream pornography, and it makes up the vast majority of all pornography out there. Now, certainly all types of people consume porn, and there are other forms of porn that feature different creators and performers and distributors, motivations, target audiences, all that kind of thing. Some of them have similar traits to what we'll be talking about, and some of them don't. However, they make up a tiny fraction of the industry, so we're gonna have to put them on a shelf for the sake of brevity today. The other thing I want to explain out of the gate is that porn is not sex. Sure, some of the anatomical parts involved are the same, but porn is not the same as sex. Sex is great. Regardless of where you stand on sex, when it should happen, with whom it should happen, sex is a beautiful act that is supposed to give us pleasure and connection. Pornography is a business. It's not designed for self-expression or sexual liberation. It is designed to make money. Just like Walmart or Exxon or Amazon, mainstream porn wants to make a profit. And all of the choices you see surrounding it are made with that in mind. Now, there's a tremendous amount we could cover on this topic. I could talk about how porn is objectifying, or how it's a shortcut to intimacy, or how it grooms us into accepting illegal behaviors, all of which are true. And if you want to hear about that, I guess just tell JT to ask me to make a series. But for the purpose of this video, I want to talk about porn in the way that most kids come to it. And that's as an instruction manual. Let's start with a hard reality. If your kid is in the double digits age-wise, it is very likely they have already been exposed to pornography. Don't freak out, they're not going to go blind yet. On average, the age of first exposure is 11. The most recent survey I've seen showed 84% of 14 to 18-year-old males and 57% of 14 to 18-year-old females have viewed pornography. There sadly is not any data on non-binary kids. So just be clear, this is not just a conversation for boys. And even if it was just boys using, that doesn't negate the impact on other people. Now, even though seeking out porn might ultimately happen for sexual gratification, it usually starts as a curiosity or a friend showing it to them unsolicited. You see, it's absolutely normal for a kid to be curious about sex. Why wouldn't they? You were, I was. It's super cool. It's magical and mystical, and there's no reason to shame a kid for wanting to know what the big deal is. That's natural. However, in the absence of obvious answers, what do kids today do if they're curious about something? They Google it. So they're going to find porn. And while you can certainly delay it or limit it with various parental controls, and I'm not saying those don't have a place, you can't ultimately stop it completely. So one of the most important ways we can frame this conversation is to explain to our children why what they see in porn, and even by extension other forms of media, is a bad instruction manual. It's not real. Quick story. All right, we have an Xbox in our house. We've had one for several years. For a long time, when we first got it though, we only had one game, Lego Batman. And as you might guess, the point of this game is for Lego Batman to save the city of Gotham from the Joker. And as a player, my young sons just had to press a button and Lego Batman would look for the Joker, would find him, would pull out his batarang, would aim it at the Joker, throw it, hit the Joker, retrieve the batarang, and put it back in his belt. One button. Now, if my son ever actually becomes Batman, how screwed is he? Right? Like, he will immediately be crushed. Not just because he's not prepared, but because he now has a false understanding of what is required to perform Batman successfully that needs to be unlearned first. You see, this is what pornography does. Children come to it, heck, adults come to it, seeking answers about what sex is like, and it provides a ridiculously oversimplified explanation. Not only that, the explanation can be pretty dangerous as well. So, here are some cliff notes about what sex looks like as defined by porn. All right? So, first thing, everyone who has sex is attractive. White, cisgen, straight, able-bodied, and fit. This is the norm. And anyone who doesn't fit that description is just there as an adjective. So, sure, you can find like lesbian porn, but it's not lesbians. It's women having sex with each other for the pleasure of heterosexual men. You can also find pornography that has black men, or Asian women, or overweight people, but if you do, it's in the title. Meaning there's never just a black man in a porn video because the pizza delivery guy happens to be black. His race is part of the selling feature in the video. It's not the norm. So porn reinforces the idea that the only normal sexual interaction is by straight, white, cisgen, able-bodied, super hot people. First problem. Second thing is that porn teaches us that sex is an elaborate set of specific acts that everyone enjoys all the time. So almost every video, whether it's a full-length movie or like a much more common short clip, it follows a script of oral sex, and then anal or vaginal intercourse, and then ejaculation outside the body. So, while proponents of pornography argue that it encourages freedom of expression and experimentation, the reality is that's incredibly formulaic. And this doesn't leave room for real people in real life who may want or not want certain sexual acts. It also doesn't leave room for individual responses to these acts. And unless you explain it, kids don't realize that. Kids don't realize that, in general, women don't orgasm after 10 seconds. In general, men don't last for 2 hours. In general, most corporate offices don't like naked people on their conference table. At least not without a mask. And this may seem obvious to us, but if porn is the only data point our children have, then they take that as gospel. Finally, if there's an obvious formula for sex, then you don't have to discuss it. So perhaps the most dangerous lesson from porn is that sex just happens. Now, this idea certainly leaves out like the little realities and awkwardness, like like trying to undo a bra strap or a partner who's had too many beans at dinner. But it also leaves out how we find out what other people want and need. And one of the most fundamental lessons we can teach our children surrounding sex is the idea of consent and making sure everyone involved is on the same page. And this is how we recognize the image of God in others. We allow them agency and choice. And porn doesn't leave room for that. There's no discussion, there's no communication, there's no relationship building or progression. Sex is just assumed, and it starts immediately. There are some occasions where someone, usually a woman, might resist sexual advances, but they are quickly won over with money or blackmail or force. And then this advances an even more problematic and misogynistic narrative surrounding sex. So it's likely not going to surprise you then that in a recent content analysis of best-selling adult videos, half of them showed verbal aggression, and 88% showed physical aggression. And of those aggressions, 87% of those were committed against women. Porn is disturbingly racist, sexist, heteronormative, and violent. So, if you're looking for talking points to take away from this, those are a good place to start, all right? Porn doesn't represent all or even most people or experiences. It does not represent what those people like or want or need, and it doesn't show you how to find that out. Now, you may be at this point kind of saying, well, that's great, but what am I actually supposed to say to my kids? And I get that. And the answer is it depends. But in order to more fully answer that, I think you should start by asking yourself a question. So don't ask yourself, how do I talk to my kids about porn? Ask yourself, how does porn fit into the narrative and lessons I've already started teaching my kids about how to navigate this world as a kind, compassionate person who recognizes God in their fellow human beings? You see, when something is scary or novel, we tend to kind of keep it in a vacuum. The porn conversation feels like something completely new. And while in some ways it is, in most ways it's a lot like the other problems we face as a society when we put profits ahead of people. Pornography is a business. It is the commodification and objectification of humans. As such, it's not really all that different from other times that we have commodified and or objectified the human experience, right? So have you talked to your kids about slavery or sweatshop labor? Or maybe you've talked about how companies ignore global warming for the sake of profits. So it's not about like, don't look at porn or you'll be sinning. Because if you tell kids not to do something without explaining the why, they're inevitably going to see that reasoning as arbitrary. So this is a great place to insert some faith-based reasoning into your conversation. You want to talk about how porn fits into the larger picture of loving our neighbor. All right, I have a second piece of good news for you too. If you are worried about talking about porn with your children, you already have. Now, obviously you may not have like busted out the Legos for like a graphic anatomy lesson, but think about what we discussed earlier. Porn provides an unrealistic expectation of sex. Have you ever had to talk to your kid about unrealistic expectations before? Maybe you caught them trying to jump off the couch because they thought their Spider-Man pajamas would give them some kind of power. Maybe as they got older, they assumed certain clothes or shoes would fix social problems. So you've already sat down with them and you have explained that the things they see in the media aren't realistic and create false narratives for how life really works. This is just an extension of those conversations. Almost nothing in parenting is one-time shot, right? All the lessons we teach, at least the important ones, start the day they're born and they end the day we die. If I'm being truthful, if not like a little melodramatic. So this conversation starts early. Maybe the terms and the specifics mature with the child, but talking about those unrealistic expectations starts right away. So does talking about the humanity and respecting someone's agency. You've done that before too, right? Like you've certainly had to talk to your child about showing other people respect, or about not taking something from somebody without permission, or not forcing people or hurting people. Like maybe when they're 3, it's about like a toy or food, but by the time they're 15 or 16, I mean, I have teenage sons, so it's still about food, but it's also about not using people and allowing them the same humanity you want to be shown. You want to treat others how they want to be treated. I think a lot of this stuff looks similar whether or not they've already seen porn. Even if they haven't, or they say they haven't, you can use ubiquitous, objectifying media examples to talk about the same issues. You can ask them what they think sex consists of. You can ask how they know if someone wants to have sex. Ask how you find out what kind of sexual activity someone wants to do. Ask how they think somebody should respond if their partner seems uncomfortable or says to stop. Ask them why they think porn doesn't show that stuff. This is a series of ongoing conversations. Some are going to be explicitly about porn and some only tangentially, but they create a healthy understanding of what sexual activity should look like whenever your kid ends up having it. Also, don't be afraid to use your own experiences. Now, obviously no one wants to hear graphic details about their parents' sex lives, and I'm not suggesting you do that. But you can say things like, it took me some time to learn this, or here's what surprised me about sex, or even, hey, you know that's not what it's like, right? And if you've personally struggled with porn, which a lot of us do, that's perfectly fine to say too. What did you learn from that? What lessons can you share with them? Regardless, I think being honest and being open and avoiding shame are all completely vital. Sure, it's going to be awkward for everybody, but it's truthful and kids respect that. All right, last bit of good news, the research. There are multiple studies that show us that there is no right way to talk about porn because almost every way is equally impactful. Meaning, no matter what words you choose, it'll help. It's not about saying the right thing. It's about saying something. So whether you choose to talk about the nuances of objectification or about clumsy bra straps, or whether you explain your experiences or you ask about theirs, you are helping put them in a position to better navigate this world in love. So like I said, this talk is far from comprehensive, but hopefully it helps you break down and reframe what can be a very strange and scary conversation into something more palatable. Thanks for hanging out with me, and best of luck as we all try to help our kids become the best versions of themselves they can be. Take care.